Is God really in control? I feel like I've heard so many people use God is in control as a cop-out. And myself, when I first started following Jesus, I kind of just defaulted to, well, that must be God's plan then. Like everything happens for a reason. But I wanted to point you to John chapter 9, because in this last weekend's message, I talked about the difference between God being in control and God being controlling. Here's a great story. It says that Jesus was walking along and he saw a man who'd been blind from birth. So how long has he been blind? His whole life. He's never seen a day in his life. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? So they jump into the same thing. People have been saying this for years. Well, everything happens for a reason, so why is this guy blind? You know, clearly he did something or his parents did something and it was a curse. And Jesus just quickly disrupts that. He says, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. And what happens next is he gives him an opportunity to show his faith, and he makes mud out of spit. I know that sounds really wild. The only way I think I could explain that is if a blind guy is gonna get mud on his face and walk over a mile to go wash it off in order to demonstrate the fact that he really is trusting what God is doing, a plan that doesn't make sense, then I think something of a miracle happens because of that faith. So I think God was doing that in order for that man to show faith. I mean, I'm pretty sure of that. And so Jesus shows us in this actual event, this real true story, that his disciples assumed that everything happens for a reason. But Jesus says, no, let's let this be an opportunity for him to trust God anyways, to take something like his life, give it over to God, and God to use a purpose. The purpose was, hey, God can take awful things and he can make something beautiful out of it. And maybe that's your life too. Everything hasn't happened for a reason. God didn't necessarily choose for you to go through those things, but because he is sovereign, he allowed those things to happen to you. That's brutal to think about, especially when real tragedy strikes. But are we gonna trust God even when we don't understand? So here's the questions that I want you guys to discuss in your group. Number one, when's a time when it was very hard for you to trust God? You didn't understand what he was doing. Talk about one of those times. Number two, talk about a time when something awful has happened to you that you probably wouldn't choose for yourself, but later you were able to use that as a testimony. Really, you were able to say, hey, if God did this for me, he could do it for you. Some of the easiest things to think about are financial challenges or health challenges or grief when you've lost somebody and yet he was close to you, or any of these different things. I know that there have been ups and downs in your life, and those downs, those valleys, those are probably the hardest times you've ever gone through. But the scripture promises that, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear. God doesn't want you to live in the valley. He wants to walk you through the valley. He wants to get you out of this thing, but on the other side, you'll be stronger, you'll have more faith, but most importantly, you will trust him more. So talk about those two things with your group. And if you're not doing the Acts challenge, it's not too late to jump in. Download the Uncomplicated app for free, and you can do one chapter a day of Acts. You can read it, you can listen to it while you're driving, or if you subscribe, you can actually watch a little video every day about the book of Acts and each chapter that you read to help keep faith uncomplicated. I love you guys, proud of you, and we'll see you next week.